Let's get started. All right, well, welcome everybody to the NSFGA Weather Stations and Tools Information Session. We're glad you have joined us, and we would recommend that you keep your cameras off, and then you can see the PowerPoint as it goes on. So today we'll be covering the NSFGA Weather Stations project update, as well as the Maryblyt alerts for 2021 and beyond. Okay, this has been a tremendous project for collaboration. I don't think I've ever seen a project that has had so much collaboration. And we are very grateful to everyone that has been involved. From the Fruit Growers Association, this has included the production committee members, which was Dave Isis, the chair until March 2021, Cassian Follett, new chair, Kelly Penner, Eric Chappell, Tim Sterling, Waldo Walsh, Doug Nichols, Dave Power, Erica Bent, Michelle Cortens, Danny Davidson, Suzanne Blatt, and Keith Fuller. It's also included, of course, the 10 individual growers who were involved in locating the weather station sites and providing the post installation for the units on their properties. The advisory team has included Michelle, Erica, Rachel Brighton, Jeff Wenzel, and Suzanne. The technical support team has included the two Jonathans, Jonathan Buffett from Cape Breton and Jonathan Bent from Perennia. There have also been many conversations with input from folks who have experience with weather stations or who are involved with pest modeling platforms. So we're grateful for every one of them. NSFGA applied to the provincial government NSDA programs for funding and received a federal provincial cap funding agreement. The first year was at 75-25, which involved the buying of the units, and then 50-50 for the second year of maintaining the units. If NSFGA bought 5 units, NSDA was willing to fund another 5 units for a total of 10 Davis weather stations. So the goal of this project was to find a sustainable, affordable system for monitoring local weather conditions to support effective control of fire blight. The Davis weather stations were chosen because they have an excellent local reputation. Jonathan Buffett, who maintains the Cape Breton Mesonet, has 80 stations, with the oldest station being 15 years old. So he has spoken well of them. They are mid-priced and commercially available. They provide the real-time data, weather data required by our industry, and can be maintained locally with reasonable cost. The 10 locations chosen, as you can see, cover the commercial growing area from Windsor to Michelle and are located in many hotspots for fire blight in the valley. I turn it over to you, Michelle.
Great, thank you, Candy. And if everyone didn't have a chance to read that full list there, we are going to be providing this PowerPoint as a handout. So you'll have a chance to go back and look at all of this information. So no worries there. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll be able to get to those. I expect we'll have time at the end of this presentation as well. So my colleague, Jonathan Bent, is going to be the next to speak, and he's our awesome research associate at Perennia. And he probably won't tell you this, but he is enthusiastic about the weather, you know, just on his own. He's worked with these Davis weather stations before. So it's great to have his expertise on the team, because he's going to be providing the technical support from Perennia for the hardware on these stations. So he's going to give you a great overview of these stations and how he's going to look at maintaining them. I'm going to take on the piece that relates more to extension and horticulture, which would be how we're going to use this data and how we can do modeling with the stations, but also modeling in terms of the Maryblyt. So feel free to reach out to either of us at any point. This is our names, our contact information, and we'll also be providing that on a handout. So just so you know, we're here for you. Okay, so let's open the box on this technology. So the weather stations project that Candy introduced there, Jonathan's going to be talking about what these stations are measuring, how we're making sure that the data is accurate, and to make sure that it's sustainable going forward so that it continues to be accurate, and also on how to access the data. I'll show you a few different places where you can get that. And then I'll go into, like I said, the Maryblyt alerts and also some smart tools that we're thinking about for the future. So I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan Bent.
Thanks, Michelle. Do I have control of the PowerPoint, or is that, nope, you got that. Okay, great. So the weather stations are what Davis calls a Cable Vantage Pro 2 Grow weather sensor suite. Basically, that means that they come with a temperature and humidity sensor that's contained in that radiation shield, that white thing that's at the bottom there. Sensors for rainfall, wind direction and speed, and solar radiation. And they communicate with a central gateway through a cabled connection. So the sensors will transmit data to the central gateway, and the gateway will upload the data onto the internet using a cellular connection, and it will update data every 15 minutes. Next slide. So we also are installing leaf wetness sensors. They're going directly into the tree canopies. As you can see here, I have the cable highlighted in orange, very easy to see. And so that leaf wetness sensor is connected to a standalone node. And that node is powered through solar power. It has a solar panel, and it also has a lithium battery backup. And that node can't put the data from the leaf wetness sensor onto the internet by itself. It has to go through the gateway. So with that being said, the node has to be within 300 meters line of sight of the main gateway so it can relay that information to the gateway and we can see it online. And the great thing about these nodes is that it allows you to take measurements directly in the orchard. Obviously, you probably wouldn't want to have your main weather station directly in the orchard with everything that happens in the orchard. So it's great to have that outside the orchard and then have these measurements happening in the orchard. And the one main thing about these is that it's important to keep your solar panel on your node and your leaf wetness sensor surface clean from pollen, dust, and chemical residues, as those can impact their performance. So next one. So the property owners were generous and donated and installed the posts for us. These posts are where we mounted the main portion of the weather station. It's really convenient because they're the same posts that they use in their trellis systems. So on the post, like I said, there's your main weather station. You can see the sensor suite in the picture there. There's the gateway with the solar panel on it, and you can't see here is the wind meter because that would be way at the top of the screen there. So we were lucky to have Jonathan Buffett help site all these different stations for us. And siting is very important because you need to pick a location that is going to give you the most accurate measurements. So a couple things actually. The sensor suite should be away from any surface that might radiate heat. So one thing Jonathan, I'm sure, was looking out for was to make sure that we were away from any concrete pads or any asphalt roadways. They radiate heat, as well as any buildings or fences or surfaces that receive full sun that might obscure your measurements. Also, your temperature and humidity sensor should be approximately 5 feet off the ground. And you want your rain collector to be away from buildings. Like, the whole station should be away from buildings and trees and things that might create a rain shadow on the station. And you'll see here, we actually are mounting the rain collector on a satellite arm away from the post, because the post will create a bit of a rain shadow, and doing this helps reduce the impact of that rain shadow. And then the wind meter, of course, you can't see here because that has to be at least 7 feet above any trees or any other buildings that are around it. So then it gets the most accurate wind measurements. So we actually attach the wind meters on a 10-foot pole, and that 10-foot pole is attached to the top of this post here. So they're running probably about 15 or so feet above the ground. And stay tuned for the April episode of the Orchard Outlook, because Jonathan Buffett is going to dive a bit more into this sort of stuff. Next slide. And then preventative maintenance plan for sustainability and reliability. So to maintain and to ensure that these stations are accurate and they're functioning properly, it's important to keep them clean of dust and debris. Sometimes you even get insects that will crawl in there. So twice a year is our plan to go out and do a maintenance run on these stations. And so I'll be going and I'll be cleaning out any dust that's in the radiation shield or any debris that might fall in the rain cone. And of course, leveling the stations, because most of these posts were put in the springtime, and the ground, the freezing and thawing, and the ground's probably going to cause the post to shift a little bit. And you want to make sure your station's level, because if it's not level, it's going to impact your measurements. For scheduled replacement parts, certain parts of these stations have to be replaced every so often. One of those being the 6-volt battery that's attached to the cellular gateway that you see here in this picture. That is good for about 5 or 6 years, so we'll have to replace those at that time. There's also a battery in the node that I was talking about earlier that has to be replaced every couple years. And there's also D-cell batteries in the node that are going to have to be replaced every season. And then the temperature and humidity sensors, Jonathan Buffett told me they, after about 2 or 3 years, they start losing their accuracy a little bit. So it's important that we get accurate temperature readings. So those will have to be replaced. And as well, we're going to have some of these parts on hand as emergency parts, just to avoid any chance of something not working on a specific station, and then we have to wait 2 weeks for a part to come in the middle of the growing season. That wouldn't be good. That's when we need the data, so we want to make sure that we have those parts on hand in case that does happen. And a community effort is going to go into these. I asked that growers that have these stations to make sure things are kept clean, especially the solar panels. We want those to be performing as best as they can because they keep the batteries charged. And another thing, the rain collector cone can sometimes have debris build up in it. And so it's important to check that every so often to make sure that that's clean. And then, of course, if anything else is not looking right, you can always reach out to me and we can see what's going on there and fix it as soon as possible. And then any station that you see that is labeled with NSFGA is going to be maintained by us. And so you'll know it's reporting accurate data and it's up to par. And now I'll toss it back to Michelle.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so now you're probably all wondering, how do you access the data? So there's going to be a few places where you can see the live current weather data. So the first one that you might be interested in, it comes directly from Davis. So this is software that they've already created and that they provide along with their product. So it is called WeatherLink, and it's available as an app for the smartphone, or you can get it online. So I'll give you the address just a few slides from now. But just as an overview, you can also get that current weather data on the NS Tree Fruit blog, which I'll also go into, or you can get it on the Cape Breton Mesonet website. So the idea with this is that all of the current and live weather data being linked into the Davis network is publicly accessible to everyone. You don't have to have an account. But when it comes to historical and detailed weather data, like any kind of analysis or like historical in terms of like past weather that's been observed, that is a pro account feature because the account owner is paying to store that data with Davis basically. So the NSFGA, because they purchased those stations, they do have an account with Davis, and they're going to be making that historical and detailed data available to their members, which you'll hear about soon. So you can only access that detailed and historical data from the WeatherLink website, which is weatherlink.com. Okay, so first I want to go through the Davis WeatherLink software here. It's pretty neat. So it looks great on the phone and nice and easy to see an overview of a number of different stations at once. So, when you get access to this shared account, the stations are going to be preloaded on that account. And so you can just see an overview there. You can click on these stations to see more detail about the current weather conditions. But then also I mentioned there's this weatherlink.com website. So I find it's not as like user friendly as the app because you can quickly see like current conditions, but the website does show these current conditions as well. Like here's the outside temperature, the total rainfall, and the wind speed. So, I mean, there's just so many options. It's up to you how you want to look at the data. So you can find out what's most convenient for you and what works for you. So this will be available on a WeatherLink account. Another option, like I said, is the Tree Fruit blog. So there's a page on the blog that's called Weather. And again, it's just taking that current weather information and presenting it in a different format, just convenient if you want to have that link handy, check it out on your phone, or if you're just on the computer, that could be one to visit, whatever works for you. But you don't need to have an account to sign on to this, whereas you do need to have an account for the Davis WeatherLink software. But if you're a member of the Fruit Growers Association, that account, like I said, will be provided to you. Otherwise, you could create a free account and add these weather stations. But again, you're just seeing like the current weather data. And then another option here, which is pretty neat, is the Cape Breton Mesonet. And this one is maintained by Jonathan Buffett, who helped us site the weather stations. So he was willing to put the weather stations on his map. So this is pretty cool when you look at this online because it's in a map format. So you can really quickly just click on the location of these weather stations, and you could quickly compare the stations to each other, get an overview of temperature and all of the other current data that's being recorded. So that's at capebretonweather.ca. And it looks pretty neat on the phone too. Just looks like this. Again, it's a website, so you don't need an account to access this current data. Okay, so I also want to talk about what you need to know about the limits of the data. Jonathan mentioned these leaf wetness sensors, and it's really important to understand that this information, the leaf wetness sensor specifically, is to help with your decision making, but you also need to interpret the data. So the moisture levels are being reported on a scale between 0 and 15. 0 being completely dry and 15 being completely saturated. So the sensor, it's really good at detecting the surface moisture, but the question is, how representative is the reading? Is it representing your whole orchard block? Is it because it's in one tree, it's on one branch? So, you still need to consider the weather conditions. If you're out there, like, are the leaves wet, and kind of get a feel for those readings. Yeah, so, I just wanted to say you still need to interpret that data. If the road is still wet and the leaf wetness sensor is saying that, the leaves are dry, then, you need to be skeptical about those kind of readings. So what you have to do is kind of set a threshold boundary where you are determining that a leaf is wet and not dry. So that basically comes with experience, and we can talk more about that in the future as well. Another thing is that we're installing the weather stations this year. So there's a neat feature on the Davis platform that tells you the total, the seasonal rainfall amounts, but you can't rely on those seasonal amounts this year because some weather stations are being installed sooner than others. So like the Atlanta and the Grafton stations, they observed some heavy rainfall events before some of the later stations were installed. So don't rely on those seasonal rainfall amounts this year, but in future years, that might be a neat measurement where we can compare different regions. Also, we don't recommend using the forecast provided in the Davis Weather Link. So you will see like a 7-day forecast in the mobile smartphone app and likely on the website as well. But we recommend still relying on the Environment Canada forecast. We have experience with that one. We know like it's a little closer to home, and that data is being validated and works quite well for our region. So let's not introduce the risk, especially when we're talking about fire blight. Let's not introduce the risk of working with a different weather forecast. Okay, so like I mentioned, the historical data is a pro account feature that's being paid for by the Fruit Growers Association. So, if you're not a member, you still have access to the current weather data, which can be really helpful for on-farm decision making. But members of the Fruit Growers Association will also receive some login information, and through that, they'll have the ability to chart and view historical data. So next, I'm going to show you what those kind of features will look like. And this is just like an overview today. We can always talk about doing some more like detailed tutorials, but I just want you guys to know before you start exploring these resources, like what kind of features are available to you. So this is a chart that's available on the website account. And, for example, you can just chart the temperature, you select the day, the time span over one day, and you can see how the temperature has changed over time. Also, what's neat about this one is that I've got rainfall and leaf wetness on the same chart. So you can see the rainfall is the blue bars with along the left side of the y-axis 0.2 millimeters of rain at each of those time points when the gauge is taking its recording. So you can see that also the leaf wetness is along the right side from 0 to 15. So, it seems like during some rain events, there might be water channeling off of the leaf wetness sensor. So again, which is why you have to interpret these readings. But obviously when it's raining here, that the leaves are going to be wet. So, you might have had some drizzle bringing up the leaf wetness. Rain continues to keep it wet. And that leaf wetness sensor, staying wet over periods throughout the day, and then some rain occurring again. So this could be helpful if you're thinking about like apple scab infection events, if you just want to check that out to match up with your own observations in the field. And like Jonathan mentioned, there's a cellular plan that's uploading the data every 15 minutes on these stations. So There is very detailed data that you could download into an Excel format. So that is an option available to you on this Pro account. And you can choose the different values that you want to display. This is really nice. I like this monthly summary. So if you just wanted to know the max and min for each day throughout the month, the website quickly generates this summary. So there's the max and the min, also like precipitation amounts. And this could be really handy if you do want to run your own Maryblyt model. That would be all the information you would need there is the max, the min, and the water for the day. So the Maryblyt communications for now and the future is what I want to get into talking about now. So, it's great that the fruit growers have some extra stations this year. This is going to cover some new risk zones that we haven't really covered previously in Maryblyt alerts. So, I'm going to continue doing those proactive email alerts to the industry during the fire blight season this year. I've explained in the past how to use the Maryblyt computer program that is available for free to download online. So that program is still available. So what fruit growers members could consider doing, if you wanted to run your own Maryblyt model this year, you can download the data from those weather stations, like the monthly summaries, and plug that into the Maryblyt computer program. That's if you wanted to run a model specific to you, like in addition to the industry alerts. I did record a video tutorial last year on how to do that. So, I believe that video is available on the NS Tree Fruit blog, but contact me, if you can't find that and if you're interested. But then also, so we've got these new stations available from the fruit growers. So Perennia is looking at and working on integrating those new stations into a new tool. And it's in the testing phase right now, but we want to give you a look at what that new tool would be capable of doing. So we've been making progress on it over the last few months. And, there have been some delays because of COVID, because, it's relying on the installation of these weather stations, and we're just getting those in place now. But we have been able to work on testing the model, which has been great. So the goal of the model that we're working on is, instead of it being a software you need to download to your computer, this is going to be available online. So it's an online version for producers. It's called a reactive website. So you don't have to download an application on your phone, but if you pull it up on your phone, it's going to resize to fit your screen, and the functions will resize so that it makes sense for a mobile screen. So what's really nice about having our own kind of automated Maryblyt model is that we've been able to customize it to the way that we like to use this model in Nova Scotia. So we've made the forecast values editable. So that becomes really important if the forecast is off, and you want to predict that it's actually going to be a lot warmer than forecast. How is that going to affect your fire blight risk? So just yesterday, for example, it was only supposed to get up to 19 degrees and it ended up being 23 degrees. So we find that is a really important component of the Maryblyt model, being able to change the forecast values. So that will be editable. We've also made some user-friendly improvements to the model that we used to use. So I guess I won't get into too much detail about that today, but you can expect to see some nice user-friendly improvements. The main benefit of having this online model is that it's going to be automatic. So you're not going to have to download the data and input it into a model. It's going to be constantly updating. And you just have to input at what stage your crop is at. If bloom has started, just a few inputs like that, but the weather data itself is going to be automatic. we've linked it to the Environment Canada forecast. So you can see here, it says like what forecast station do you want to use? So you could choose if you're, you know, if you rely most on Greenwood, or perhaps you use the Kentville forecast. So you can choose that there, and then you'll be able to choose the weather station that you're closest to, or that you find represents your farm best. And so the forecast station will be playing into the Maryblyt forecast, and then the weather station closest to you is what's going to be recorded for historical weather. Yeah, so we hope to connect more stations in the future as well. So you know, growers will be able to consider adding stations. So we can definitely talk about that more in the future. But this is the goal. This is what we're working on and working towards. So yeah, like I said, we've been working over the last several months with our programmer. So this has been a project that Perennia has taken on. And you know, we want to make sure that the model is very stable. We want to have a stable transition phase this year. We don't want to release that model prematurely without having a year to actually validate it, compare it to the model that we've used in the past, and make sure that it's reliable and that the results match. So I'm going to work on validating that this year. I'm going to be running the automatic model in conjunction with the manual model, and also providing those manual alerts to you. And then we can look at soft launching that website for testing by the industry after this season. And we're just really excited to say that the Maryblyt model is going to be one of the first tools available on a smart farm tool website available from Perennia. So we really hope that'll help with decision making in the future. So that's all we had planned to talk about today. Hopefully it gave you a good overview. I know it's probably a lot to take in, and it's taken a lot of people to pull this information together. But if you have any questions about the technology, Jonathan's here now, and about the horticulture, the data, and the modeling, just let me know. You can put it in the chat, or you know, feel free to unmute, and we can have a discussion right now. So there is one question in the chat: do we need a login? I think that came in earlier on, so hopefully that got answered. So you do need a login for the WeatherLink account, and that will be provided to members of the association. But you don't need a login for some of those quick views like the Treeford blog and the Cape Breton Mesonet. Peter.
Yeah, Michelle, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the fruit growers and to everybody who has put so much hard work into this. It's just, we're really grateful. So just want to say thank you. And I'm looking forward to, you know, all of what this means for industry. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions, anybody?
So when will we get the login, Michelle? Like, when will that be sent to us?
Very soon. So I'm just putting it together with a few tips and the username, and I'm going to touch base with Candy, and I think that can go out before the end of this week, I think. Yeah, I'm sure more questions will come up once you guys get to explore the system, and just feel free to reach out to us at any time. Yeah.
Looks great, Michelle, John, thank you.
Thank you. Candy, I don't know if you had anything to say. I think we're pretty much wrapped up now.
Yes, I think that's it
Okay.
for
Well,
this
thanks for joining.
information session. Yes, thank you very much for joining us.